Good morning. This is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook from Tuesday, July the 28th through Friday, July the 31st. So we have a couple of features that we are continuing to look at. We still have this undulating frontal boundary through the southeast region. That's remnants of what used to look like a frontal boundary this way that pushed down through South Carolina and Georgia and into central Florida. We've been watching this area for the last 24 hours as we've seen a little bit of spin and rotation. This is something that we've been kind of expecting to see along the tail end of this frontal boundary as we normally would, where you get frontal boundaries that stall over Florida this time of the year. So we're watching this area as it spins, and it should sort of drift across Florida, make a reconnection with the Atlantic along this tail end of the boundary, and then sort of drift up and out to the Atlantic. Now the question is it going to develop into something tropical? And this entire area is very moist and it has plenty of moisture available at the surface. However, there is a lot of upper level shear going on, and that's mostly in part due to a very large upper level ridge that is over this area, and it's more over the Texas area, I would say, than anywhere else. But it has a lot of upper level northerly winds really biting down into the storm, so a lot of the activity is staying to the south. And if we look at the infrared loop, we can see what looks like a little bit of a low pressure right here, and you can see most of the cloud tops and any kind of vertical stacking are staying to the south of this low pressure, simply because that upper level shear and this dry air are really pulling down into it. So if we take a quick look at the earth.nullschool.net map, we'll look at the surface, and you can see this surface low pressure right here in the northeast Gulf of Mexico, where the land and sea interface. And this low will continue to drift across Florida and towards the Atlantic to try to make a connection. Like I said, there is abundant moisture available, and if we take a quick look at the precipitable water, or PWATS, you can see all the moisture that is available in this area. The blue represents the drier air, and these oranges and reds represent the moisture available. So there is plenty of moisture along that boundary, and you can actually see some of the rotation of this moisture. But if we go back to the earth.nullschool.net map and start looking higher in the atmosphere, we'll start to see this upper level ridge start to come into play, and you can see it right here where it's showing this sort of a northwesterly wind become more northerly, and then if we go even higher in the atmosphere, we'll see this jet actually increase to go up to 250 millibars. And there we have it. So you see this very strong wind coming down and across, and this is what is representing the upper level shear for the storm. So cloud tops are only going to be able to build to a certain height, and then they're going to get pulled away to the south. So as soon as they can build, they're getting pulled out, and that's why I'm not thinking that this is not going to be a favorable environment for tropical development. And we may have a tight, compact low be able to survive the surface as it cuts across with maybe some mid-level cloud building, but we're not going to. I don't think we're going to see anything tropical. It may pop up as an Invest 94 from National Hurricane Center at best, but I think as it drifts off to the northeast, we're not going to see very much development from that. So let's take a quick look at the local area, and what we have right now is we have sort of a northerly wind. It's a very similar setup to what we saw yesterday. We have this sort of northerly wind, and we can already see it turning just a little bit to the northeast in the harbor. And as the day goes on, the sun comes up, we'll start to see those numbers start to come up a little bit. We'll see the winds lean out to the east-northeast. We're seeing that here at the Capers nearshore buoy. We're already seeing sort of an east-northeast lean. And as the land heats up, we'll see that sea breeze oscillation start to begin. What I mean by sea breeze oscillation, yesterday we saw where we had east-northeast winds, and we saw thunderstorms developing all in this area here and inland along the sea breeze front, and that went all the way down the coastline. So what you end up having is you have sort of this easterly flow coming down the coastline. Land is heating up. Your thermals are coming back up again as the air is coming down over the water, and then it's hitting land and coming back up again. So you have sort of a condensating or a saturated flow coming into the coastline that's less buoyant, and as it goes over this hotter land, it becomes more buoyant and actually rises as thermals versus our typical southerly sea breeze where your buoyancy is already there. Your winds are circulating back into a sea breeze. This is more of an oscillating sea breeze where it just sort of dissipates. The thermals rise, the storms come up. There isn't really any outward circulation back into the coastline. It's really more of a temperature gradient that happens between a little bit of that cooler northerly element and then the hotter land that comes in. So our thunderstorms likely for today will be inland along these areas where the hotter, more urban heating is occurring. So we'll probably see some downwind thunderstorms become a little bit stronger in this area from downtown Charleston, probably in this area over the harbor from Mount Pleasant, and then of course in the North Charleston area where this urban heating is going on, we'll probably see some downwind storming a little stronger over in this area. So that'll be the local. Let's take a look at the models real quick and see what's going on for the rest of the week, just for guidance. And I think what we'll find is let's make sure we select all. We'll go back to today and let's get the screen size a little bit bigger. Alright, so you're seeing some of this model guidance, and we're showing this east-northeast flow this afternoon. The models are jumping up just a little bit, and I think some of them, the GFS is definitely picking up on a little bit for this afternoon, where we see a little bit of a I would say 11 to 15 knot flow off of this, and that's based on the sea breeze oscillations, where it's actually going to pick up just like yesterday. I think we got up to about 15 knots tops, but it stayed right between 13 and 15 for the most part along the beaches at the piers. And as we go later on in the week, we start to see models start to get just a little bit shifty. There's a frontal boundary that's going to be sweeping in by Thursday, so they're starting to pick up, different models are picking up on that. And we can see the NAM 12 kilometer start to pick up on it, and then become a little bit shifty. And then the Canadian and the yellow, that sort of stays more of a southeast flow. The GFS, they start to become more southerly, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But you see the lower resolution models fall off by Friday, or I'm sorry, the higher resolutions fall off by Friday, so we don't have a whole lot of guidance there, and it's a little bit too far out to make a call just yet. We can get a general idea of what the forecast will be, but if we look at yesterday's reading, we see some gusts that actually came up to about 18, 19 miles an hour. There may have been a touch near 20 miles an hour along that 15 knot bump right around 5 p.m. I'm expecting something very similar to this today, very, very similar. So let's go back to the surface map. I want to talk a little bit about what's going to happen the rest of the week. So we have this low pressure that's going to sort of drift off to the northeast. It may get a kind of a recurve back up this way and then out into the ocean. Like I said, I'm not expecting anything to really develop from this low pressure system, anything tropical, because of this gigantic upper level ridge here. Now what's left of this undulating front in this area and this high pressure to the north, we're seeing that easterly flow. This boundary is dissipating, and it will lift as a warm front. And what's going to happen is this area of low pressure is going to come across the country and sweep that up. And when we talk about occluding lows, occluding low is when you have a warm front lifting into a cold front, sort of folding into it, and then you end up with all the energy sort of taking it across the country, and then we have a frontal boundary, and as it taps into the Gulf, it's going to pull moisture up ahead of it, and then we're going to end up with more of a southerly swing into Thursday and Friday as that frontal boundary nears the coastline. We'll see the winds start to become more of a southerly flow as we get a little bit of a rebuild of a Bermuda High ridge out here in the Atlantic Ocean. It may be a little bit more of a coastal ridge closer to the coastline, but I do think that we're going to see more of a southerly flow as we get later in the week ahead of this cold front that develops right here. And then as it approaches the coast, that high pressure will block it, and then we'll also have the high pressure out here to the west that will keep it coming this way. We'll have high pressure here keeping it this way, so it'll be sort of sandwiched at the coastline. And I don't think we're going to actually see it clear the coast. I think it's going to stay at the coastline and back inland and become a residual trough. It's very similar to what we have right here. This dashed line represents a trough, an area of troughing. If it gets pushed back into the Appalachians, it will become a lee side trough. If it pushes to the mid-state, it'll become a Piedmont trough. And that would actually help for sea breeze circulation. So this weekend we could start to see some stronger numbers, but like I said, it's a little bit early to call it just yet. For right now, the players for the extended forecast are going to be this high pressure to the north providing this easterly flow. Actually, it's more like this into the coastline above this undulating front out in the Atlantic. So we still have an easterly flow going from the high pressure to the north, and then That will cause a little bit of a convergence zone inland along the sea breeze front, where you have that sea breeze oscillation and the thunderstorming over the heated areas. Like I said, it's not much of a circulation, it's more of an oscillation where it just sort of, the temperature gradient provides that 11 to 15 knot flow. As we get into tomorrow, we see this low pressure over this area, and this is actually providing sort of a counterclockwise direction. There may be a little bit of a gradient, but I'm going to say 10 to 14 knots of more of a southeasterly flow. Just between this low pressure and the high pressure, we're going to be sort of pinched between a variable wind flow from the east or southeast, somewhere in between both of those. And the gradient, we may have some pulsing in and out, some ups and downs along a southeast flow. It might be saturated. We might have some rains and showers coming on shore from it. And as we get into Wednesday, we start to see that low a little bit further away. We still continue to see a little bit of an easterly flow as that high pressure sticks along the coastline, and then we have sort of a southeast element. We have a frontal boundary coming, and so we start to see that southerly bend and more of a south-southeast flow, and we'll stay 10 to 14 knots on Thursday, and then into Friday we'll continue with the 10 to 14 knot flow on the southerlies based on the cold front that's approaching. So we'll have to wait and see what happens on Friday with the frontal boundary. If it stalls just along the coast, it could be kind of messy as it taps into the Gulf. If it stalls inland, we could see higher numbers with potential sea breezing really starting to crank up, and then into the weekend. So we'll go with that. So for today, 11 to 15 knots east-northeast. Tuesday, 10 to 14 south-southeast, southeast. Wednesday, we'll say 10 to 14 on south-southeast flow, and then on Friday we'll see 10 to 14 south or south-southeast. And that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report. Have a good week.